Now, we have spoken in a lot of detail about how data pipeline orchestration works in theory, but I think it's time to bring in one of our product experts to actually demonstrate how these functionalities come together to create self regulating data pipelines. So, I'm going to be bringing Farhan in. Farhan is responsible for the technical side of things here at Astera, and he has played a very major role in putting together the product that we're talking about today. So I think that he's the best person to answer any questions that we have about the platform and what it can actually do for us. So, hi, Farhan. Are you with us?
Yeah, hi Afnan, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good as well.
All right. So, can you just introduce us to the platform? Tell us what it does. Show us what it looks like, please.
All right, sure. Let me just share my screen. Let me know when you can see it.
Yep, we can see it.
All right. So as a starting point, let's let's just take a look at a brief recap of the things that we covered in our previous webinar, which by the way, if you missed, you can view on our YouTube channel, or if you wanna request a personalized demo, you can go ahead and visit our website. But initially, before moving on to the portion of focus within this webinar, which is data pipeline orchestration, let's have a look at the modeling portion of the entire process. Now, first of all, as our audience might be aware, this entire product is data model focused. Everything revolves around these two data models that you can see on your screen right here. So this particular data model is the source model, which represents the transactional database that we want to get data from. Now, our first focus is going to be getting data from the transactional database that contains the actual valuable data that you want to put into your data warehouse. So these tables represent these entities. The boxes that you can see on your screen represent the tables within that particular database. And once we've extracted data from this model, we'll basically be populating the model that you can see on your screen right here. As you can see, there's multiple different colors right here, and these different flavors represent the facts and dimensions that we have within our data warehouse. Now, what we've done is that we've designed these models from scratch using our tool, and then what we've done is that we've deployed them to the server, meaning that we've published them to the server and made them available for usage. And I'll just show you that in a bit as well. We have both of them available on the server. And now what we'll be doing is that we'll be using them in ETL pipelines to basically populate our data warehouse. Yeah.
All right, so you have your facts and dimensions ready, but how exactly do we go from there to actually populating our data warehouse? Can you show us how that works?
Yeah. So I think this is a good point for me to introduce you guys to the data pipeline module that we have within our product. This module is represented by data flows, and I'll just open a sample data flow and show it to you guys. Um, okay. So basically, what you can see on your screen right now is what we call the data flow designer. You can think of this as a blank canvas where you can add all sorts of objects that you want from the toolbox on the left hand side of your screen and design a pipeline from scratch. So basically, obviously, the first step of designing a pipeline is to extract data from a particular source. In the toolbox on the left hand side of your screen, you can see a section titled sources, where you can basically get a source object of your choice. We have this intuitive drag and drop interface that you can simply just use to drag an object of your choice and drop it onto the data flow designer, just like this. So basically, first of all, you'll be needing a source object. And once you've extracted data from a source, what you'll need to do is that you'll be putting that data into a particular destination. And we have a destination section for that purpose. But in this case, our focus is on facts and dimensions. And to load facts and dimensions, we have a separate section titled Data Warehouse that basically contains two objects of interest, the dimension loader and the fact table loader. So what I'll be doing is that I'll be designing a data flow from scratch and show you guys how we can use this intuitive interface to basically take data from the source database and write it to a dimension of our choice. Now, as you saw earlier, I did drag a database table source object from the toolbox and drop it onto the designer. Now, to simply just configure this particular object, I'll go into the properties, and we have this database connection screen right here. And within this screen, you can see the data provider drop down menu that contains an extensive list of providers that you can basically use to connect to any sort of a data provider that contains your source data. So in this case, I want to extract data from a deployment that I basically have on the server, a deployment that represents my source model. And for that, we have this data provider called Astera Data Model that I can connect to. So I'll choose that from this drop down menu. And then all I have to do is just provide my credentials for DW Builder and provide my server name. And once I've done that, it'll just give me the deployments that are available on the server for usage. Now, since this is a source object, I'll be selecting the source deployment that I showed you guys earlier. And once I've chosen that, I'll just test the connection quickly and move on to the next screen, which is the pick source table screen. And from here, let's say that I want to extract data from the customers table and then use that to populate the customers table within my dimensional model, within my actual data warehouse. So I'll extract data from the customers table right here, click on OK, and you can see that basically all of the fields that were present in that particular table are now present within this particular object. Now, the next step obviously is to get the dimension loader object from the toolbox and write my data to the dimension that I want to basically populate. Now, in this case, we have the customer table right here, as you can see in the dimensional model that I showed you guys earlier. Now, what we'll simply do is we'll do the exact same thing that we did for the source object. I'll just go into the recently used drop down menu, select all of my credentials that I've already saved up by entering them into the source object, and then I'll just simply just select the destination deployment, the data warehouse, the dimensional model that I'm basically using as a destination. I'll test this connection as well, go to the next screen. And in this particular case, since this is the dimension loader object, in the pick table drop-down menu, all I'll be able to see is the dimension entities within my dimensional model. In this case, I'm going to populate the customer table. I'll go for the customer table here. And here we have it. We have the dimension loader object configured as well. Now, the final step is basically to map the relevant fields, the relevant data from each field to its relevant counterpart within the dimension loader object. Now, in this case, I have the customer ID. I want the data present within the customer ID field in the source table to basically be written to the customer ID field within the destination table. I'll simply drag this node and map it to the customer ID field within the destination object. And I'll do the exact same thing for all of the other fields present within my destination object. So there we have it. We've designed a data pipeline from scratch within like a couple of minutes. And all I need to do right now is that I need to run this particular data flow. And once I'll do that, the data that has been extracted from the source will be written to the destination.
All
Is
right,
this?
that's
Yeah.
fantastic. So we just have to drag and drop our objects from the toolbox onto the designer, and we have a fully functional data pipeline. That looks incredible right now, but can you tell me if I need to write any code for this at any point in the process? Now, later,
Um,
anytime?
No, you do not have to write any sort of code for this entire process. As I mentioned earlier, we have this intuitive drag and drop interface, and we have all of these objects within our Dataflow toolbox that you can use to design these pipelines from scratch. Actually, what I'll do is I'll show you an example to basically create a clearer idea of how easy all of this is compared to writing manual code. Now, as we saw earlier, I designed a data flow to populate my customer table within the dimensional model. I've basically repeated that entire process for all of the tables within this particular dimensional model, because obviously I want to collectively populate my entire data warehouse using the dimensional loader and the fact loader. Now we have multiple data flows here, and similarly, we have a data flow to populate my fact tables as well. In this case, the fact table data flow obviously contains the fact loader instead of the dimension loader. And we also have the data model query source as a source object instead of the database table source object, because this particular object has the ability to extract data from multiple tables at the same time by just providing a root entity and creating a tree layout that basically contains multiple tables. So what I've done is I've extracted multiple tables at the same time that you can see here in the layout of the object as well, and I've mapped, I've picked all of the fields that I need and mapped them to the destination object. Now I'll just run this data flow and show you what happens in the background. Now, once I run this data flow, you can see the job progress window, which gives you an overview of what's taking place. And let's just have a look at the query that's generated in the background. Now, this is the query that you would have had to type out manually if you were to basically be performing all of this work manually by just writing all of the code by yourself. Now, obviously, in this case, we have the data model query source object as well that contains multiple tables at the same time. And to join multiple tables, you need to perform multiple joins. That creates a very complicated query for you to type out and basically execute. That would take a lot of time, a lot of effort from your end. But all of this code that you can see on your screen right here has been encapsulated within these four objects that you can see on the data flow designer on your screen. So yeah.
All right, I'm pretty sure I just saw over 100 lines of SQL code, and I am not sure if I'd be able to type that myself.
Yes.
Okay, so data pipelines, we've created them. We have the facts and dimensions. I don't have to write any code. Um, but what about transforming the data? How do I clean my data? What if I want to filter some data and make sure that only specific records are going into my data warehouse and not the entire thing? What can I do in that case?
Yeah, for that, as I mentioned earlier, we have the data flow toolbox on the left hand side of the screen. We have a separate section dedicated to transformations within our data flow toolbox that contains an extensive variety of transformations. There's 400 plus transformations. Whether you want to filter your data, whether you want to cleanse your data, whether you want to remove distinct values, whether you want to sort it or add an expression of sorts, whether you want to join a couple of tables together, we have the functionality for all of those things available. Plus, we also have some functions that you can use to basically modify your data as per your requirement. So all of that is covered by the Dataflow toolbox.
All right, so that was
Yeah.
quite a number of transformations that we have over there. So from what I understand, these pipelines that you just showed me, they were very focused on the ETL side of things. Since, like I said earlier, ELT has been gaining a lot of steam, and Paul just told us that he hasn't used an ETL pipeline in probably like 10 years now. So um, does does this product allow users to create ELT pipelines as well?
Yep, there's no worries there as well. We do support ELT. We have this thing called pushdown mode, where you can run a job and a query is automatically generated and pushed down into the database provider that you're working with. We have this button right here called start job in pushdown mode. And if I were to click this particular button, a query would be generated, and then all of the work would be happening within the actual database provider that you're working with. So all of that is covered. And most organizations do prefer this is the ideal approach for them because it significantly reduces the load time needed for a particular job, especially when the data set involved is extremely large. So we have this capability as well.
All right, so you just talked about load times, and that actually kind of brings me to my next question. When we're talking about organizations that are actually building a data warehouse, they're obviously dealing with data that's coming in from several different sources, and it's very high volumes of data that we're talking about. So, what happens in case my source data is changing? Am I gonna have to load all of my data from scratch every time I make an update, or every time there's a new record, or if I want to delete something? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, naturally, once you've populated your dimensions or whatever data destination you're working with, you wouldn't want to check all of the records for any updates in each subsequent run. That would significantly increase the load time. And to counter this, we actually have a built-in change data capture functionality that you can use. Basically, what we have here is that we have the incremental load based on audit fields option, and when I click on this, this allows me to basically select an audit field and load data based on this particular audit field. This would basically significantly optimize the process since only the records with an altered audit field would be checked, and that would really increase the speed of the entire process. And we have the CDC file right here, which basically saves the last audit field that was basically worked with. So all of this entire process, the change data capture process that we support, basically optimizes the entire process, and you don't have to check all of the records in every subsequent run.
All right. So
Yeah.
well, now that we're talking about subsequent runs, if I have a data process, if I have a data pipeline that I want to execute multiple times, am I going to have to manually execute it every single time? Because when we're talking again about large organizations, if the data keeps on coming in from different sources and different, and if we want to consolidate it, then it's probably going to be really time consuming if I have to manually execute it every single time. So automation,
Yep.
that's the keyword
Yeah.
right now. Do we have anything for that?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, in this particular case as well, as I mentioned earlier, we have multiple tables within our destination, and we have multiple different pipelines that we have that are basically collectively populating the entire data warehouse. As you can see on the right hand side of your screen, we have like about 5 or 6 pipelines that we're using to populate the data warehouse. Now, obviously, running all of them, executing all of them individually would be a time consuming process. And for that, we have the orchestration module, which is represented by workflows. And I'll just show you a new workflow to give you guys a basic idea of what workflows are. Okay, so what you can see on your screen right now is very similar to the data flow designer. This is the workflow designer. Over here, you can simply just drag and drop data flows directly from the project explorer. You can drop them onto the data flow designer, and you can basically create a flow chart of sorts where you can decide whether you want to run all of your data flows sequentially or in parallel. We can basically just drag and drop multiple data flows at the same time, and then join them, basically create a sequence like the one I'm showing you guys right now. We can create mapping links between these data flows as well to create a flow chart of sorts. Now, I've already created a flow chart like this one. Basically, what's happening here is that we have the dimension loading data flows first that are being executed before. And then, after all of these executions have been successfully completed, we have the fact loading data flow at the end to complete the entire process of populating your data warehouse. But the question arises, why stop at this point? Because obviously you'd have to run this workflow to execute all of the individual data flows, right? So to automate this process, we have the built-in job scheduler that you can see on your screen right now. Basically, what you can do here is that you can just create a new schedule, assign a name to it. Let's just give this a sample name, and you can provide a path to the file that you want to run at a particular frequency. So in this case, I want to run this particular workflow. I'll provide the path, and once I've done that, I will assign a frequency to it. So in this case, I have multiple options. I have quite a few options available in terms of frequency. I have the option to run it daily, hourly, weekly, or even if I wanna run it up to near real time. We have the continuous option available as well. So you can basically assign a frequency based on your requirement. So that is where the automation part comes in, and you can even basically just we have this orchestration pipeline ready right here. You can turn it into a more dynamic self-regulating pipeline by using these workflow tasks available on the left hand side of your screen. If you want to basically send an email, you want to transfer a certain file, or you want to basically run an SQL file, an SQL script, or something like that, we have all of these objects available as well. So we have this orchestration pipeline available that basically automates the process, that orchestrates the entire process of running all of your separate ETL or ELT pipelines. And once all of that is done, we automated that process through the job scheduler by basically providing the path to the file that we want to run and assigning a frequency to it. So yeah, that's how you automate the entire process.
Fantastic, fantastic. All right, then thank you so much for the thorough demo, Farhan. That was very, very. It was a great demo. Thank you for showing us how the entire process works from gathering our facts and the fact that I don't have to write any code for the entire process, and that I can schedule everything.
Yeah.
So for everyone who's watching, as Farhan just showed us, Astera Data Warehouse Builder has so many different drag and drop capabilities that enable you to build complex data pipelines that can load data incrementally into your data warehouse. You can even schedule the processes that so that you don't have to execute them manually. And this level of automation, it actually reduces the development time significantly. And again, as you just saw, it leaves you with a self-regulating system that basically populates your data warehouse in near real time. On that note, I guess now that we're done with the demo, now that we're done with the now that we've heard what Paul had to say about automation and orchestration, it's time to take some of your questions. So we do have a couple of questions over here. Let me just take a look at them. All right, then. So we have a question here which says, what sort of learning curve are we looking at if we want to implement the solution in our organization? Do you offer additional training to cover the gap? Farhan, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, okay. So we do offer additional training, and other than that, whenever we take new customers on board, we do offer an additional training where we teach you guys from scratch on how to use our product. And other than that, we have our 24/7 support available as well to guide you in terms of whatever you're working with, whatever your use cases. So in terms of training, in terms of learning the product itself, you're absolutely covered.
All right, then. We have another question over here. This says, how can you identify errors in your data flow? And do you have any functionalities that can speed up the correction of these pipelines?
Yeah, basically what I showed you guys earlier was that when you run a particular data flow, you have this job progress window that pops up and shows you the line by line execution of that particular data flow. And if you do encounter an error, that error is indicated within a line in the job progress window, so you can identify it pretty clearly, and you can rectify the error really quickly based on what you see within the job progress window. And other than that, we also have the option to verify a particular data flow while you're working on it. So by verifying a data flow while you're working on it, you can basically just rectify all of your mistakes or whatever issues you have within it while you're creating your pipeline from scratch.
All right, now we have a very interesting question. This says our company needs to ingest data from over 100 retailers and their customers, including product feeds, logistics, and behavioral data, while maintaining efficiency for online shoppers. We have to maintain high data quality for analytics and ensure that the timeliness of deliverables at an efficient price point. Can this product support this kind of use case?
Okay, I'm gonna have to go over that question. Just give me a second.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so basically, in terms of maintaining high quality data, we have you covered because we have like a massive set of transformations that you can use to cleanse, to filter out, to sort, or do whatever you want with all of your data in terms of bringing it to a state where you're satisfied with it and you want to load it into your actual destination. And in terms of ingesting data from over 100 retailers and supporting all of that stuff, we have multiple data providers available, and we can extract data from any sort of a source that you have, whether it's flat files, whether it's some sort of a database, whether it's a cloud provider. We have a huge variety of data providers that we support. So in terms of getting data from them, we have you covered. And in terms of basically cleansing your data and modifying it to a point where you're satisfied with it, we have a massive set of transformations that you can use to do that and basically maintain the quality of your data. We also have a data quality rules object as well that you can use to basically figure out if there's something wrong with the quality of your data and you want to and if you want to rectify it based on your requirements.
All right, so I think people have been watching your part very attentively because we have a question
Okay.
which says that you touched on data validation. Do you have any sort of profiling capabilities that allow users to dig deeper into outputs and check the quality of data in their pipelines?
Yep, we actually have a separate section for this within our data flow toolbox. We have the data profiling section available that contains four different objects. We have the record level log object where you can keep a log of your errors. We have the data profile object that creates a profile of your data. We have the data quality rules object, as I mentioned earlier. And there's basically a combination of objects that you can use to create a comprehensive profile, a comprehensive log of your entire data. So profiling is something that we can definitely do within our pipeline, within our data pipeline tool.
All right, and that was the last of the questions. So thank you so much once again, Farhan, and for everybody who joined in. If you're still interested in learning more, we have a lot of resources on our website at astera.com. We have the previous webinar, which was on data modeling. Besides that, our website is full of content, which includes white papers on the topic. We have blogs, we have videos on YouTube. You can always check those out. Once again, it's at astera.com. Stay tuned. We have a lot of more webinars and great content coming your way. Thank you so much once again for everyone who joined.